Hello, welcome to Sneakers Corner, and I'm here to solve a few mysteries. Number one, why does the Quran refer to Muhammad as the last prophet? Why does it refer to the seal of the prophets and refer to messengers quite a lot? The other mystery I want to figure out is the Mesopotamian connection with Muhammad and the Quran, and the Syriac connection. I also want to look at where the Quran gets its style from, or lack of style maybe, might be a better way of putting it. Also, why was it considered normal for someone in Muhammad's time to claim to be a prophet? In fact, there were a number of people who claimed to be a prophet in Muhammad's time. So what was the cultural background at that time that would explain that? Why also would they use the word apostle, considering that is a Christian term? Why would he use the term apostle in a non-Christian sense? We're going to find some clues to help us solve that mystery.
And are you the biggest and finest private collection in the world?
Actually, I think so. They tell me so. It's not the other people who estimate it.
What sort of size is it?
Well, and you're seeing in the Arabic, the rare text, about 2,700, but a typical number is the fact that these books are extremely rare. You would go and buy 5,000. Scripture that was copied, and they're like penguins in a way, copies of the same stories.
So here we have some Ottoman Qurans. So these are codices from 600 AD. The first one is one that contains the Pauline epistles and John's Gospel. The second one contains the Acts of the Apostles and John's Gospel. And this one here contains the Psalter and Matthew's Gospel. And as you can see, they're in very good condition. This map gives us an indication of where Manichaeism started and how it spread. And notice where it began is also very close to where Islam began. So this first fragment here is a homily from the year 400 AD. This is from the Triumph of the Kingdom of Light, Sermon on the Great War, from the Manichaean homilies, and it's in Coptic from 400 AD. Here's another fragment. It's called The Conflict of Light and Darkness from the Bema Psalm, from the Manichaean Psalm book, and it's also Coptic, 400 AD.
Around the same time, he visited Egypt for the first time, with Edith and the two children, and his eyes were opened there to the wonders of Islamic art.
Well, I first went with my wife to Egypt in 1913, and while there I bought some Oriental manuscripts and one or two verses on Koran. And then I had a small library before. And then I began to concentrate on the Oriental and bought a certain number of Western and kept all the time adding to the Oriental.
Well, 50 years ago, was it easier to come by?
Oh, very much easier.
Than now.
And then particularly the last 20, 35 years, you see young people in the East from home inheriting and then anyone they dirty the books, in many cases they have worms, and the bindings are falling to pieces. But any one of them would trade 2 or 3 dozen of those for a shovel, and never would read them. And we were able to buy from these libraries the rarest books of many. I had a man looking for me, and first Professor Yahuda had a great many rare books, and I bought a great many from him, and I had my own organization.
Over the years, Beatty spent many winters in Egypt, and there he acquired some of the most historically significant items in his entire collection, including the earliest book of St. Paul's letters in existence, dating from the 3rd century.
So welcome everyone. Really excited today to have two of our regular guests in one show. We have Murad, a familiar voice on our channel, and we also have Bala, who's back again to talk to us about the foundations of Islam. So welcome to you both. Yesterday I had the pleasure of going to the Chester Beatty Library to investigate ancient documents as a kind of a starter to what we're talking about today. Don't want to give too much away at this point, but Murad, could you talk to us for a couple of moments about the connection between Mesopotamia and the origins of Islam, because this is going to be key to our overall picture today.
Yes, hello, and thank you for having me again. And it's great to be with Bala. This is like the dream team. Mesopotamia, actually, we have the only first reference to the Muslims being part of a geography is in Iraq. It's in the Chronicle of 741, and it says that the Muslims they worshipped in the place which Father Abraham says that he built his house there with Ishmael, and it's between the place of Ur and it's the desert between Ur and Qara. And Robert Hoyland he says that Qara is something other than Qar. I don't know why, but it's very clear that Qara is close to the Qar. The is like of the or something. This is the Arabic, so it's Qar. So this makes a lot of sense. And actually, you have also the Chinese Chronicle. I think it's the official Tang history. It says that the country of the Arabs, it came out of Persia, and it was talking about Iraq still. And you have a lot of things like the Battle of the Camel. It was in Al-Hira. We do not have a reference actually in the Sunni, but we have in the Shia that it was in Al-Hira, and lots of the milieu of the Shia was in Al-Hira, and this is Iraq. So you see, if they were up in Petra or in Saudi Arabia, still you are talking about something very illogical. If I want to have a fight with someone and he is in the same place, we might meet at the same place to fight. Why would we go and travel all this way and traveling parallel? Well, this is crazy. But if you are here in a car and the opposing side come in an opposite direction in a very short distance, then it makes more sense. It makes more sense that these people were in Iraq. So what document do we have to connect Mecca, Saudi Arabia with the first Muslims? We do not have. And this is not an argument from silence, it's an argument from opposing, contradictory evidence that these people were here in Iraq. And you see in the Chronicle 741, it is a bit late, but it seems like the guy who is writing is not naive. He is giving details, which means he knows what he's talking about. So I think Mecca was at some point at least in Iraq.
Yeah, thank you. So just to give us a sort of geographical idea, the way I was thinking about this, the whole area that's of interest to us creates a massive geographical fez. You know, the Egyptian hat? So if you imagine if you go from the west in Eila and Petra across east to Tema and then on to Basra, that forms the bottom of the fez. Then if we sort of head mostly northwards, you have Khuzestan, Baghdad, Ur, Ctesiphon, Nisibis. And then if we go west from the north, you have Palmyra, you have Damascus, and then heading south again, Jerusalem and Petra. So all of the key areas is within that giant, I suppose you call it a parallelogram.
Or quadrangle.
What?
I'm not sure.
Quadrangle, yeah.
Yeah, quadrangle.
So basically everything of significance is in that area. So that's a little bit of a background. So we're going to make the case today, everyone, that Manichaeism and the founder of Manichaeism, has had a huge impact on the foundations of Islam. So Bala is going to talk to us first of all about the life of Mani and early Sasanian history. So, hand it
Yes.
over to you.
Thanks, Mel. Thanks for having me here. Hello to Murad, and hello to all our listeners. And thank you for your continued support. Here, we are going to talk about a very less known figure. His name is Mani Patek. Patek is the name of his father. In Greek, he was known as Manes. Uh, Money itself, the word itself seems to be a title, just like Muhammad was. Money seems to be a person who will lead you out into brightness. So that is what. So the word Greek word manis stands for someone who pours out luminosity to you. And now why he took upon this title and his actual name is lost to history, we can find it out from his teachings, which would come in phase 2. We would be looking at this video in 3 phases. The first phase, we're looking at the biography of Mani as we've gathered it from Fihrist by Ibn al-Nadim of the 9th century. So nothing close to the 3rd century, in which Mani was born and he preached and he died in. And then the second phase would be the intermediate period between Mani's death and Muhammad's life. And the third itself would be the formation of Islam, as I have already contended, during the Umayyads period, uh, and how they borrowed teachings or concepts from Manichaeism. So that would form the third phase. The first phase itself was Mani's birth happening in the Ctesiphon capital province, not exactly in the city, but then somewhere in the province. He's born in the Parthian Empire. He is born in the Parthian Empire, and he belongs to one of the prestigious families of the 14 big families of the Sasanian period, in which there were 7 Parthic families and 7 Phallo families. The eastern families, to which Sunbad belonged to, and the southern families were the Miranbad. The eastern families were the Suren, the families of the Suren, and but the western families, in which Ctesiphon itself is lying, were a group of families called the Isfanbud, right? Because they were more closer to the city of Isfahan, right? They had their center at Isfahan, whereas the general rulers, whoever the Sasanians or the Parthians were, they were ruling out of Ctesiphon. Ctesiphon continued to be the capital city of the uh, later Sasanians as well, because they were facing threats from the eastern White Huns or the Hephthalites, and the later Huns who were called the Kidarites. So they kept the capital city away from the Huns, more closer to the western border, more closer to their later enemies, that's the Romans and the Arabs. So that is why Ctesiphon becomes a very easy prey to the Arabs, who just had to ride up maybe some 300 kilometers from their Lakhmid base, from the Lakhmid base. So the contention that there is a Mesopotamian thread running to the origins of Islam is true, because the Lakhmid precipitation at Hira, or present day Kufa, up till the Dar al-Kar, is because they feel that they are the legitimate claimants of that land, which is another holy land for them. Just like they marched into Jerusalem, just like they marched into Egypt, they had a concept saying that their origin was from Persia, or from Mesopotamia, and from Egypt, and from Jerusalem. So they wanted these places for the apocalyptic clock to tick off. So Mani is born in the Parthian Empire in 216 to his parents Patek and Mariam. He's the only son because his father takes up, becomes a monk. He takes up, ascetic life with the Elkasites. The Elkasites themselves are a club of people living in Ekbatana near Palmyra. They actually practice their asceticism in Palmyra. They were a self-sufficient agricultural group which originated from the Ebionites. The Ebionites themselves, as you all know, originated from the Qumran Essenic cult, which was having John the Baptist as its one of its spiritual leaders, Jesus Christ as one of its leaders at that time. Jesus Christ then becomes nomadic in the city region, whereas John the Baptist and his followers continue to stay in the countryside, in the rather in the forest, in the wilderness. And the split between them, that is the early Jewish Christians, the split between them leads to Ebionites and the Nazarenes. So those Nazarenes are the people who are referred to as the Nasara in the Quran. And the Elkasites are Jewish Christians, and they are more leaning towards John the Baptist than towards the Christ movement. Okay, so they take up ascetic life there, and at the age of 12, he receives a message from his heavenly twin, whom he calls as Jibril. So we can connect that to Islam once again, because Jibril is the one who carries the message to Muhammad as well.
Can
So
I
at the
just
age,
stop? Can I just
yeah,
stop you there
yeah,
because
yeah, yeah,
you've
yeah.
obviously given us a lot there. Just to clarify, you're saying that Mani called this twin, this angel, Jibril. Is that right?
Yes, yes, it's Jibril.
Jibril. Wow,
Yes.
I hadn't heard that. No, that's interesting because
Uh,
I was Murad wants to come in as well. Do you want to?
Yes, you see, Gabriel is the same as Gobrail. It's the angel Gabriel. So Mani, he might took it from Judeo-Christian
Tradition.
basis, not the other way around. You see, because Mani is after. So Gabriel is just Gobrail, and I think in the book of Daniel there is something connection of Gabriel, and the message.
And the word is it a Syriac word? Is it a Syriac version of the name? Or
Jibril,
Yes,
it,
yes, yes. Because Mani writes 7 works. We're going to look at his books, 7 books that he writes. Only one is from Persian book, Persian language, Middle Persian. All the other 6 books are in Syriac. So that explains to you the Syro-Aramaic origins of the Quran as well.
yeah.
Because we have already discussed that a lot of these apocryphal stories about Christ or John the Baptist, which have come into the Quran, have come through Manichaeism. So it's
And
200. Yeah.
yeah, just on this, it is really important point. The Manichaeans were central in preserving these works as well. So they were
Manichaeans, along with Basilides, we have a lot of these proto-Gnostics like Philo or Simon Magus,
yeah.
Cerinthius. We have Valentinius, we have Menander, and we have Basilides. And money belongs to this proto-Gnostic Christianity. What is very interesting is Emperor Diocletian in 296 he puts forward a decree saying that all these Christians have to be killed. Now he includes Manichaeans as well into it. So Manichaeans were, for all practical purposes, for all the non-Christians, were treated as Christians. So you have to look at them as uh, heterodox Christians or Christian heretics, Gnostic Christians,
Yeah.
proto-Gnostics actually. So it's 228 AD, and Mani receives the first revelation during his ascetic practices at Palmyra from his twin, called from Jibril. And the next revelation he receives at the age of 24. The number 12 is becoming very critical here. We'll see why, because Mani also had 12 apostles, like Jesus had 12 apostles. So in 240 AD, he starts proclaiming his sect. But in the meanwhile, his father, Patek, who had taken him there, passes away. So he's not under the bindings of his father to be more restrained with his message or something. When he proclaims his new message, he's thrown out of the sect. The voice guides him, it asks him to go east. So he comes to Sakastan. Sakastan is nothing but the land of the Shakas. That is the western part of India, which is today in Pakistan. And he reaches there and he learns a lot about Krishna and Buddha, right? And he already knows a lot of things about Jesus and Zoroaster, because he's from the Middle East. So then he comes back to Iran Shah, comes back to Ctesiphon, and he founds Manichaeism in 242 AD. So he lives in India for around 2 years, including the 3 months travel to and fro. So he founds Manichaeism along with the support of the second Shahanshah, that is Shapur. Shapur is the son of Ardashir. Ardashir is the founder of the Sasanian dynasty. In the meanwhile, when he goes to India and comes back, he sees that the Parthian Empire has been defeated and a new empire called the Sasanians have come up. Ardashir is the grandson of Sasan, and the dynasty is named after the great person Sasan. And uh, the second emperor, that is Shapur I, he seems to be a very tolerant person, so he allows Jews, Buddhists, Christians, Hindus, Jains, the Zoroastrians, and these Manichaeans to follow their own religion as they will. Now, Mani becomes a very close friend to Shabur I because he writes a good eulogical text called the Shabur's Gan. That is written in the Middle Persian so that the king can understand it. All his other books, including the Book of the Giants, which we'll be referring to, the Book of the Giants refers to giants as in not in stature, but in the great prophets before him. So he mentions El Kasai, he mentions John the Baptist, he mentions a few apostles of Jesus and Jesus himself, and then he mentions Buddha, Krishna, and Zoroaster to give a more syncretic, a more cosmopolitan kind of gospel. He proposes a dual cosmogony, and why he is given the epithet of a prophet is because he prophesied a great catastrophic war between the forces of light and the forces of darkness, much along the lines of Hormuzda and Ahriman, in that is the satanic force in Zoroastrianism is called Ahriman, whereas the divine one is called Ahura Mazda.
Can I
And yeah,
can I just jump in there? I just want to point out for our viewers that while Mani had a list of prophets that he said preceded him, and he was the ultimate prophet at the
also
end of a line, we see the same thing in Islam with a different
yes,
set of prophets. Maybe some of them are similar, like Jesus is similar, but a different set. So I just want to point out the other thing just before we move on. My video appears to be frozen on my end. Am I frozen?
Yes, I see you are frozen.
I'm frozen. Okay, well, hopefully it'll clear later. Okay, carry on. Sorry, Bala.
yeah. So he continues proselytizing and going around the countryside and telling that he's the new Zoroaster, and he has traveled to heaven and come back with this book called Aharzang, Arzhang. Okay, and he also gives another thing called the Living Gospel. So the Arzhang is the book that he's got it down from heaven. That's what he shows after a year of disappearance. We wonder where he went in between, and all these are accepted by the people. They lap it up, and a lot of conversions do happen. He goes about creating his own church, and where the people permanent converts are called the elects, and the people who are casual visitors are called the hearers.
Um,
And yeah,
Going to have to interrupt you again. Sorry about this, but I just want to point out the fact that in both Muhammad's and Mani's case, they have a journey up to heaven.
yes,
Yeah,
yes, yes, yes.
yeah. Okay.
And in Zoroastrianism, we have another person called Jamasp the seer. He also undertakes a heavenly journey. I think he's the first to undertake that heavenly journey on a mythical animal. And yes, yes, Murad.
Yes, the first heavenly journey, I think it was Enoch. Enoch. It's
Mhm,
mentioned in the Old Testament, but the one I think which closely resembles Islam is the one of Zoroaster, where he rides the seven heavens. And you
Heavens,
see
heavens.
this, yes, you see the seven heavens are. It was added later onto the text, and you can see this with Daniel Brubaker's Quranic corrections. The word seven was added later, so it as if it got more like Manichaeized or more Iraqized, something
Iraqi
along those lines.
Zoroastrianized.
Yes,
Between Enoch and Jamas, who went to heaven first is, I think it's a good topic to debate at some other time. As far as I'm concerned, I think Jamas was the pioneer to heaven on a mythical animal. So after this, Shapur passes away in 270, and his son, the first Hormizd, he's the third son, and he is a successor. First Hormizd, he rules for a year, an uneventful year, but then he founds the city of Ahwaz in Khuzestan, and he promotes another figure called Kartir as the Mobad, and he makes him also the Dadwar. The Dadwar is the judge, and also the chief of the ministers, that is called the Wuzurgan. So we have the word wazir as a minister, and you have the word wuzurgan. Wuzurgan means the head of the wazirs or the ministers. Now, why this figure of Kartir is very important? Yes, Murad.
I just wanted to add that in Arabic, wazir is it's the exact same word. It means minister. In
Minister,
Arabic, you can say prime minister means a wazir. It's the
wazir,
same.
wazir azam,
Wazir.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's
wazir
interesting.
azam. So Kartir is promoted as the Mubad, and if you see, he's also girdled. He's given a special kind of a girdle which is reserved for the most highest priest, is offered by Hormuz to Kartir. Now Kartir starts to influence the next successor, because Bahram I is brought up under the tutelage of Kartir. Now Kartir gets a upper hand over Mani. He asks Bahram to imprison Mani in the beginning, that is in 274. Mani has 2 more years to live in the prison, whereas he communicates to the outer world through his apostles, of which he had 12 apostles. And we know the names of two of them. One is called Satik. P is silent, P-S-A-T-T-I-Q, right? And then we have another person called Sisin. Okay, and we know the names of the other apostles, but we're not sure of them. But these two people are very important politically, because in the post-money period, these guys play a very important role. So money, yes, yes, Murad.
Could I just say that the word Sadiq, it's very close to
Yes.
Abu Bakr, Abu Bakr
Yes, Abu
Sadiq.
Bakr Sadiq. Yeah, I would tell this in phase three. That is what I told you, that I had communicated via mail to Mel, that we have a lot of startling revelations here. I would come to that. So Bahram one imprisons Mani. He passes away in 274. His son Bahram II comes to power, and Kartir convinces Bahram to execute this heterogeneous teacher, who's brought in a lot of foreign influences via Jewish teachings and Christian teachings and Hindu teachings into Persia, and has polluted the religions of the father of their forefathers. And as a result of which, Mani is flayed. He's described as crucified, flayed alive by Bahram II at Gundeshpur. We know that he's flayed at Gundeshpur. To make sure that his remains don't become a monument, his body is disposed of in maybe in the Caspian Sea or in the Arabian Sea. We don't have a tomb or a monument for him. Now, what Kartir does after this is he becomes very political. Okay, he becomes equal or greater than the king. He goes on to support the rebellion in Armenia, and he goes against his own king, that is Bahram III, in 294. In between this period, he ensures the execution of all the other disciples, immediate disciples of Mani. Okay, so that, and most of them flee to India or to China. So that explains why and how Manichaeism reached China. Now, the people who went westwards, Manichaean refugees who went westwards, their leader was someone called Sisin. He was an apostle, and he was executed by the Romans, presuming that he was a Christian. So the Romans did not have any qualms about killing Paul or Peter. So they don't have any qualms about killing Sisin. So this is a roundabout thing. What Kartir does is he inscribes Zoroastrianism. He inscribes Zoroastrianism into the heads of the masses by putting up a monument at a place called Naqash-e Rustam. Naqash-e Rustam is the necropolis of the Achaemenid dynasty, having the tombs of Darius I, Xerxes, and Artaxerxes. Whereas Pasagarde itself has the tomb of Cyrus. Naqash-e Rajab is the place that he establishes, and we have the face of Kartir himself inscribed into the rock. So that shows you how important he was, and his reform movement, it spins off into something called Zoroanism. So Zoroastrianism undergoes a reformation movement post money, and they cleanse themselves and purify themselves of this thing, and they have a new divine being called Zurwan, who's above Hormizda, and he is the biggest force from which all the other light and darkness, that is Hormizda and Ahriman, everybody come out of it. So they have this divine unsullied being called Zurwan, who doesn't have any kind of duality. So this was to overcome the duality that was proposed by Mani. So Kartir does everything within his powers and within his nation's boundaries to wipe out Manichaeism in every form that he could. So this is the first phase of our talk, and here we end the um, talk on the biography of Mani. Almost quasi autobiographical because his apostles write it down even as he dictates his life to them.
Before we move on, one of the things I would point out is the fact that Mani was very self-conscious about what he was doing in terms of writing things down. He believed that if you didn't write things down, you'd be forgotten very quickly, and he believed that he could become in some way immortal through his writings. So he set about writing as much down and ensured that there was a legacy left behind him. Something that we don't see done quite so well in Islam, I would say.
No, what we can do here is, if we analyze his biography, whatever we spoke for the last 20 minutes, he was born as a worshipper of Marduk. Marduk was the primary god which was worshipped in the Akkadian Empire under Nebuchadnezzar. It was a Babylonian god who had these pyramid-like temples called the ziggurats. So we can understand that Mani is the last connecting figure between the early antiquity and the late antiquity. So he comes here in between and stands like a giant, connecting Gnostic Christianity with Zoroastrianism. I think the Eastern Church Nestorians were very much influenced by his method of going about their daily activities. We'll see how the church, Manichaean church itself, was arranged, right? Murad wanted to come in.
I just wanted to say one of the important things about the figure of Mani is that he claimed to be the Paraclete, which is the comforter, and he also happened to claim to be the seal of the prophets. So this is the idea that maybe got connected to Islam later. But you see, the comforter, as we discussed, maybe it's the Holy Spirit. It's not just a figure. And you have in the biography of Ibn Ishaq, you have some confusion about this, whether it was a paraclete or not. So and it has to do with the translation and with the manuscripts and stuff. So there is a lot of studies in this part. So you see this.
Okay, now we move on to the period. I was about to mention the Paraclete and the Comforter in Muhammad's the last phase of this talk.
Last phase, okay.
The second phase of this talk is we are going to look at the time in between Mani and Muhammad, right? So let's look at the Christian reaction to Manichaeism and what he proposed. We don't have very bright accounts of Mani. We have one account from Socrates of Constantinople in the 5th century. So he runs down Mani and he calls him some kind of a miracle maker or a charlatan, And you have Ambrose was fighting against Father Ambrose was fighting against Arianism. He also took it upon himself to fight out Manichaeism as well. Now, Jerome refers to a fight of Archelaus called the Disputation of Archelaus, and what he does is he shows that Mani loses the debate, right? So these are the accounts that is given by the late Christians by the 5th century. Now, we have in between the tall figure of Saint Augustine. He lives between 354 and 430. For a good period till 400 or 397 at least, he was a Manichaean, and he was not a hearer but a elect, and he was in a very high position in the Manichaean church. Now, in one of these open disputations and contests that they had, we must remember that world or the Western world turned Christian in 323 with the conversion of Constantinople. Now, the time between 276 and 320, the Manichaeans, for all practical reasons, were treated to be another type of Christians by the non-Christians. Let's say by the Jews or by the Romans or by the Arabs. They treated them to be Christians only, because in the Manichaean church, they had Christ in the middle and the figures of Zoroaster, Buddha, and Krishna in the lateral sides of their hall. It was basically like a synagogue. It was like a open place where they venerated the cross. So, for all practical purposes, the Manichaeans were considered to be another form of Judeo-Christians only, because they had some Judeo traditions with them, the Judaic traditions with them, and they influenced the way the rabbinic records are written down. That is, the Babylonian Talmud writing method was taken up by these people, taken up from these people, because these were, like Mel mentioned, very systematic people in their writing work. So that was about the Christian reaction to them and the Judaic reaction to them. Augustine's conversion seems to be a very important lynch point. Now, if you look at the time period between Jesus is 30 AD, Muhammad is 630 AD, right in the middle of it, in 300s, you have money. So money is the midpoint between Jesus and Muhammad. Okay, and the impact of that he had from Christianity, or the impact he had on Islam, cannot be overlooked at all. Now, after the 5th or the 6th century, we have the more orthodox Christian imperial church chasing out or executing money, Manichae's followers, and the Cologne Codex of the Manichaeans, or the one that you have nearby to your place at your library, is all derived from the 4th century and the 5th century. Now, the great writers of this period are not known to us, because Manichaeism, all these books are all incomplete. These palm scripts are all burnt. Right, even Diocletian orders all these horrendous writings to be burnt, and even the later, as later as Theodosius, who had the Council of Constantinople in 551. Even then, there is one of the decrees in the ecumenical councils against Manichaeans, calling for the destruction of their books. So, following these several decrees, most of the literature of Manichaeans has been lost to us. The biggest source of his life is from Ibn al-Nadim, as I told you, from the 9th century. That's the biography. And his works and the derivatives from his works are from disputationist books, which are arguing against Manichaeism. So you can collect points of Manichaeism from these books of someone like Father Jerome, who compiles the disputations of Archelaus.
Can
So,
I
yeah.
can I just jump in?
Yeah.
A lot of the patristic writers give the impression of Manichaeans as insane heretics, and they base that on the idea that they're not only that the teachings were mad, but also they kind of do a kind of a wordplay with mania. They connect it to the Greek participle manes, which means like raving.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is, at the time of Muhammad, he's accused of being a mad prophet. For example, Surah 37:37. I've just quoted here very quickly. Nay, but he whom you call a mad poet has brought the truth, and he confirms the truth of what the earlier of God's message bearers have taught. So there's a kind of like, in the context of what we're talking about, there's a kind of a hint that it's not just they're saying that Muhammad is a mad prophet or a mad poet, but there's a hint of that he's a Manichaean, or influenced perhaps by Manichaeism. Just throw that out there, yeah.
Yes, I just want to comment before you go on about Muhammad being mad. The word is magnoon. He said, وَمَا صَحِبْكُمْ بِمَجْنُونَ. And magnoon, if you look at the root, it comes from gin. So it's like someone who is being possessed by a gin, not someone who is mad. So maybe this is not very close. And about Manichaeism, you have, of course, we know about them from, like Bala said, from Father Jerome and stuff. But this is the same case with the Ebionites and and the people who had the Gospel of the Hebrews and stuff, we still don't know anything about these people, their writings, but we just know from these sources which are disputing them, like the Ebionites and other heretical sects, Christian sects.
Yeah, it's obviously, yeah, we do have to take into account that these are biased impressions of this sect. Obviously, yeah, that's
Right.
true.
So we see that the Zoroastrians come up with Zoroanism. We see the Judaic people reforming their Talmud, looking at money. We see the Christians reacting in this particular way through decrees after decrees against Manichaeism. Now let's look at the pagans. The most important among the pagans are the people from Yemen. I think Murad is taking note, because the people, the third people of the book that is mentioned in the Quran is the Sabians. The Sabians are from Yemen. Now you can have to understand as to why so many people migrated from Yemen to the northern part of Arabia, that is Arabia Petria. Why did so many people come up there is because the establishment of the Himmerite kingdom, which is a Jewish kingdom in Yemen, which did not tolerate pagan practices. So the pagans had no choice but to come up and work for the Ghassanids and the Lakamids. Okay, and now these people go on to become the Yemeni in the case and the Yemeni polarization, as I told you later. So these are the Sabians who come from the southern part of Arabia. They are taken into the Manichaean fold in the Lakamids. They primarily work for the Lakamids, and they are the Tayye, the Tayye,
Fantastic. I was going to make that
right?
point. Yeah,
So this is the connection,
excellent,
and
brilliant point.
they are against the Himyarites. The Himyarites are a very intelligent kingdom who build up the greatest dam of the ancient world, that is the Marib Dam, which breaks up. That is mentioned in the Quran, the flooding of the dam, and that dam is built up by the Himyarites. The Himyarites, not to take away anything from them, they were very good navigators. They were very good builders. They were very good water conservators. They had a wonderful water harvesting program, better than what was in Petra, what was run by the Umayyad clan. As I told you in the last time, the Umayyads were into water conservation. So, but when we look at these Sabians, I'll just make one remark, Murad. So the Sabians have been clearly argued, and even in Tom Holland's book, he has said that it has been argued that these are the third people of the book, and they were some kind of a quasi Manichaean or completely semi Manichaean in nature. Yes, Murad.
I think there is a little bit of confusion about the Sabians.
Yeah.
What you're saying is a hypothesis, but
Yes.
you
Yes.
see in the Quran it says as-sabi'ah, and sabi'ah, if you look, you will find in Iraq as-sabi'ah al-manda'iyah, which means the Mandaeans. It's in English.
Mandian. Mandian.
It's not Sabians. In English, it's Mandaeans. These people were mainly in Mesopotamia, and these in the Quranic manuscripts you have that this as-sabi'ah is being added later in one manuscript. So it's also added in a grammatical error. It says as-sabi'un, it should be as-sabi'in. So this is part of getting the Quran maybe more Iraqized. So
Oh,
I think
interesting.
it has nothing to do with people of Saba, which is Yemen, and the Sabaean script. I think it has nothing to do with it. It's Iraqi, it's the Mandaeans, and these people were the followers of John the Baptist. They said this is the last prophet. These are
Yes.
different people. You
Yes.
see?
But the Mandian connection, I would go with the Mandian connection, because if you see, John the Baptist is the last second prophet in Manichaeism as well,
Mm.
because the Elkasites, the guide called Elkasai, he lived during 150 AD. Now from that sect emerges Patek and his son Mani. Now, the Mandian connection with the Manichaeism is the Mandians separated themselves from the Manichaeans during the era of persecution. They said that we don't have anything to do with these Manichaeans. Let us live our life on our own will. But somehow, even those people, be it the Sabians or the Mandians or the Manichaeans that I'm talking about, everybody had a part of the book that Muhammad is referring to. So they all belong to the Ahl Khitab. They all had a possession of this book. So if we clutch all those Arabian tribes who were non-Zoroastrian and non-Christian, and possessing the book, we can call them Manichaean or Mandean. Because a gap of 50 years or 60 years is too small. Even if it's overlapping between the Mandeans and the Manichaeans.
Can I
If
just jump?
if Yeah.
Just jump in very quickly. I think the key point in Manichaeism is the idea that your book gave you authority from God,
Yes.
and it's part and parcel of being a prophet. You needed a book. Yeah.
Yep. And Prophet Muhammad tells his followers that if and when you're in doubt with my word, you are supposed to refer to the people of the book. And the people of the book are only three: the Jews, the Christians, and the Sabians. Because the Manichaean base of Babylon was too far from the area from which Muhammad was operating, right? So I think that is why Muhammad, tells them you can refer even to their book as well. Yes, Murad.
I think when the Quran is referencing the book, I think it's very clear that it's just referencing the Bible. So it says, if you are in doubt in what we gave you, ask the people before you.
Hmm.
And yes, if you ask the people before, they
Manichaeans
say
are
the
before
same.
them.
Yes, but I mean the book. What is the book? Is it just the Bible,
No, it
or
is
is
not
it
a. No, no. They are very clear as to what the book was. They know that the Tawrat, the Ziburat, the Injil, all these things constitute the book together. They
this is
have
the
yeah, they have an
this is the
understanding that
Bible?
but what Money mentioned, Money also has references from it. If you look at the Living Gospel of Money, we have a book by Duncan Greenless. It's called the Gospel of Money. It is completely from the Gospel of Peter, the Gospel of Thomas. They have the Gospel of Thomas in them, and they have the apocryphal Pseudo Matthew, as late as the 5th century in their book. We refer to Jesus's infant childhood stories that are there in the Quran, in which the infant Jesus makes the clay birds, makes them fly. He asks all these apocryphal stories are from the Kitab. The Kitab is not the Bible. It's not the Torah of the Jews. It is from the Sabians, and the Sabians are none other than the Manichaeans. Uh,
That's a
Ma-
good
Mani-
point.
Man- yeah, actually, Manichaeans were the repository of all the non-canonical Bible chapters. Bible New Testament has only 22, but actually there are 46. The remaining 24 were owned, were edited, were compiled, were conserved by the Manichaeans. By losing the Manichaeans in the 14th century forever, we have lost a lot of literature to history. Yes,
But
Murad.
what I'm asking is, do you
Yeah.
have any evidence that all these books were compiled into one book? Because when the Quran says Ahl al-Kitab, it's one book, so it looks very clear that it's referring to the only book which is known, which is
One
the
book.
Bible, all the New Testament only.
No,
This
but the
is
Bible
this is
was
what we are talking about.
but the Bible itself, in its present format, was compiled in 380 in the Second Ecumenical Council, not in the Council of Nicaea. The Bible that we have today is a post-Nicene product, right? And what he is referring to is because when there were persecution from the late Sasanian, let's say Khusro I, Anushir I, or Khusro Farviz, these people run to Petra. As I've already told you, Arabia was a theological dustbin having all kinds of heretics of all religions possible living there, including Hindus, including a lot of these Minim. Minim are the heretics of Judaism are called as Minim, and all kinds of Christian heretics. They carry their literature into Arabia. Now, this is a good place for a wannabe prophet to be in because he gets all these apocryphal stories, and when he makes a book, lol, they all appear there. They
Yeah,
all appear together.
yeah. Actually, a point I want to just make here while we're mentioning it is that the the difficulty I had trying to understand Islam is how anyone could put themselves forward in the cultural context and people would accept that someone claimed to be a prophet. So clearly, in that area, in that geography, they are familiar with the concept of people coming forward as prophets, even as late as the 6th and 7th century. So it's not unusual.
Mel, I think because Murad, because of his Islamic upbringing, cannot deny the point that I'm going to make now. Okay, Murad, I think you know Prophet Khidr, Prophet Hud, Prophet Salih. Prophet Shuhaib. All
Yes.
these people are from a Iraqi milieu. They Shuhaib, I understand Shuhaib was working in Basra, okay, in that the basin, Euphrates Tigris basin, where it meets the Persian Gulf. Whereas you look at Prophet Hud or you look at Prophet Salih, they were working in the Sinai Peninsula along with the people of Edom, right? The Edomites. They were working along them. They were giving the all the prophets who ever said that there was one God come in the Islamic lineage of prophets. So
Are
they
can
say
I
that, yeah,
just
yeah.
to clarify something? Are these contemporaries of Muhammad? Is
No,
that
no,
the
no,
point?
no, no, no. They are
Prophets,
not the
prophets in the
contemporary.
Quran.
They are,
Oh, earlier
predecessors. Yeah, they are
prophets. Yeah. Oh,
predecessors.
sorry. Okay.
In between the let's say the post Daniel period and the Jesus period. So these are the prophets of the late Achaemenid, and these are people who were rising out of the Alexandrian catastrophe over Persia. So these people are coming up and they're saying that Alexander is our enemy. So Sikandar, as he's mentioned, he is mentioned too as son of a Satan who has come to destroy our civilizations. So these prophets want the people to worship the true God in order to save themselves from the success of Alexander. That is what Alexander was made out like an enemy of many civilizations, and these prophets were repeating the warning. So what Muhammad does is he calls himself the culmination of these Ishmaelite prophets and the Isaac line or the Jacobite line prophets. He calls himself the culmination of that, and also he takes a lot of Sabians into his folds, saying that Mani had said that there would be a warner before the catastrophic war between the forces of light and darkness. Here I am, the he's calling them as Nurain, that is the sons of light, right, versus the sons of darkness. So Muhammad is saying, look, here I am, the representative of the light, the forces of light. Come and join us, become bright, get ready for the paradise. That is what the message of the Quran was. So in a way he was culminating Mani's message, also in a way he was culminating Christ's message also. What made Christ special among all these milieu of these multiple prophets was that Christ went away alive. Christ did not die. So Christ has this chance of coming back. He's not in occultation somewhere hidden in the earth like Baal, but he is flying away to the sky. He's went to the paradise and is sitting with the God. So everybody wanted one or the other connection with Jesus. So this is the time period between Muhammad and Mani. These were the mixings that happened, and I would still go ahead with my hypothesis that the Sabians, the Mandians, and the Manichaeans were one at that point in time, and they all had another book which we don't have today. Maybe we'll call it as Document X, which was very similar to the Torah and which was very similar to the Bible of the Christians. The Imperial Church had a Bible, so everybody was in possession of a book, and the Umayyads understood that they needed to produce a book, which was produced and compiled during Abdul Malik's period along with Yusuf al-Hajjaj.
Excellent. So
Just I want to add something, Mel. I have a theory about who was these prophets, Shu'aib and Salih and stuff.
yeah.
Shu'aib, he might be Jethro of the Old Testament, and Salih, he might be a figure which is mythical, a myth, Zoroastrian myth, which is Zala. Zala, he fought against the dragon which came out of the rock,
Rock.
and yes, and Zala and Saleh, it's very clear they killed the dragon, and they say in Arabic naqa. Naqa is like the camel, but if you look at it in a manuscript, it could just mean naga. Naga, it could mean the dragon. So Salah, it might be just like a Zoroastrian myth, and it
Wow.
got reproduced. And the stuff of Salah, they say in Saudi Arabia, it's in somewhere called Al Ula, and Al Ula is very near Petra. And you see these rocks that they thought that dragons came out of the rocks and stuff. And the idea comes from like the people of Lot, that they became pillars of salt and stuff. So the idea that you turn into a rock, or you come out of a rock. So So you see, you have like multiple theories in the Quran. Who are these people? So I'm just putting this on the table. You see.
Excellent.
Mel, I'd like to come in here. Actually, what happens
Yeah.
is we must remember that Zoroaster may have been a contemporary of Moses in 1300 BC or 1200 BC, a late contemporary of Moses or someone like Krishna in India. Now, what happens is uh, in between Zoroaster and Mani, there were a lot of Zoroastrian preachers as well. And Jamasp the seer, who undertakes the heavenly journey, or like what Murad is saying now, we have Saleh or we have Shuhaib working in the Tigris Euphrates basin. They have a Zoroastrian lineage and a biblical lineage. So these people are somewhere in between, and there were a lot of preachers in between Afghanistan and Iraq, for which every Sufi preacher who converted every Zoroastrian back to Islam was preaching on the lines of those ancient preachers whose names we have lost to history. I would try my level best to come up with their names when we do Zoroastrian influence on Islam. But then the proselytizing included a mixed match of Zoroastrian teachings as well as Muhammad's teachings, or what constituted the Sufi teachings, and that is how they converted the whole Iran to Islam. You should remember that Zoroastrianism became a minority for the first time in Iran only in the 10th century. So
Okay.
we have 300 years in between the Islamic invasion, political invasion, and the complete conversion of Iran to Islam. There is around 600 years in between, but they become a minority if that is a break point in the 10th century only. Now
Excellent.
that brings us to the end of the second phase of the talk.
Yeah.
Now we can move on to the third phase of the talk, in which we can see the influence of Prophet Mani and his disciples who made the codices, especially the Cologne Codex, and the way in which it is written. That is how the surah and the ayah pattern, that is the chapter and the verses pattern, was taken up from Mani's writers, and even Bible also is broken up into verses and chapters from them.